How did I become a Trails fan? It's a pertinent question, something that I'm sure every individual within the fandom has contemplated to themselves at one point in time. When was that moment where you realised that you were on the Kiseki train for the long haul? It's an instance where you remember exactly where you were, and the precise moments in time that it occurred. And it's no different for me. But as I continue to make content primarily focused around the games, I found myself looking back at the path that brought me to this amazing series, the sequence of events that led me to the world of Zemuria. And now I want to retrace and share with you how I became a Trails fan, interlaced with backstory. So we're going all the way back to 2012, when I was but a budding sprog in my first year of university, at the University of Sussex to be precise. Shout out to the Brighton crew. It was coming up to the end of the academic year, the parties had sputtered out, the students were returning home for a summer break, and I had just finished my last exam. Looking into my last scraps of a bank balance that had been drained on weekends of clubbing, I realised I had a spare pittance before I went home. And I wanted to reward myself for seeing through the exam period. I'm sure everyone has that motivation that they use to push themselves when they need it. Now, unlike many veteran JRPG players, I was relatively late to the party. I only started playing JRPGs seriously during the 7th generation of consoles when I bought an Xbox 360, and as such I had never played some of the older classics that many others had grew up with. And that could sometimes lead to a lack of inspiration. But when I'm struggling to find something to play, I can always count on my trusty advisor, Steam, to fix me up. As I perused the store, I stumbled upon an item on sale, a game with 2 letters for a title. Weiss? Is? Whatever it was, it had a pretty cool trailer and it was only 15 quid, so why not dive in? What did I have to lose? This was the moment where I was introduced to Nihon Falcom, the game that raised my awareness of this brilliant company. The game itself, Ys Origin, was an excellent introduction to what Falcom games are so good at. A solid story, crisp and challenging combat, a strangely endearing art style, but also something that would stick with me well before I even knew what the Trails series was. The music. I had not been pumped up at video game music since my days with the Dreamcast, playing Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and blasting out Live and Learn at max volume. Sorry neighbours. This was the rediscovery of how important a great soundtrack is for me. And it's fair to say that the music was the cherry on top of a very positive experience. By the time I was done with Ys Origin, I wanted to play another game in the series, and thankfully Falcom had me sorted with Ys Felgana, which I played soon after. And even though I still kept my gaming to a relative minimum in the upcoming final 2 years of my undergraduate life, I knew that I had found a hidden gem of a company and that any game bearing their logo would likely be right up my alley. Fast forward to 2014 and I've just graduated with an average 2-1 in business and management. The goodbyes were said, friends went their separate ways, and university life was supposedly over. And like many, I was caught in a rut after my 3 years, as I still had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. All I did know is that I wanted to have a career in business in some way, hence the wide scope of the degree I took. As a result, I was jobless for a fair chunk of time after graduation, and while putting myself through the job application grind, I had some time to kill after the 10th round of numerical online testing. So, why not find another game to play? Going back to Steam Sensei, I once again scanned the offerings, and as if by fate, I stumble upon that familiar name, those recognisable 11 letters in the developer area. Nihon Falcom had once again made themselves known to me, but this time the game on offer was not an Ys game, rather it was for something else, a game that looked decidedly different to the fast-paced action of Ys that I had grown to enjoy. But as I watched the trailer, I saw the familiar graphics, the excellent sprite work, and yes, the mountains of positive reviews. And if so many others had enjoyed it, there was surely a good chance that I would as well. A short time later, and the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky was installed on my computer, and I wasted no time in giving it a go. I witnessed the rescue of a young boy and adoption of a son. I travelled to the town of Roland and joined 2 junior bracers on the first steps of their rite of passage. I gazed upon their success and travelled with them to a mysterious tower. But alas, Just before the descent, I realised it was 12 o'clock in the morning, and I had an assessment centre the next day. It probably would be a good idea to call it an evening and get a good rest. I saved the game, closed it down, and had every intent of going back the next day after my interview was done. I did not return. Needless to say, my assessment centre did not go well. Remember when I said I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life after university? Well, at this time, I was pursuing jobs in sales. Now, I'm not saying that sales careers should be scoffed at, I'm simply stating that I would blow at sales. I lacked the character and the personality to do it, and this became very apparent in this particular assessment centre. I was chewed out in the various stages, especially in one test where we had to roleplay myself trying to stop an angry client taking their business elsewhere. The guy acting as the client was enjoying it way too much. But the kicker came near the end of the day. On the final part of the assessment in a one-to-one interview, I was told in no uncertain terms that I had no experience.
Oh shit!
Now I knew that this was a test, a trial to see if I could blag my way around a weakness, but at this point I was so disheartened, so disillusioned with the idea of working in sales, that I gave up at that point, and I was swiftly removed from the process to take the train back home. But hey, it wasn't all bad for two reasons actually. First of all, since I was applying for a job at a large confectionery manufacturer who owned the likes of Cadbury's, I got a big bag of chocolate to take home, back when they did the Dairy Milk Ritz bars too. Results. But more importantly, this experience also demonstrated to me that I needed more. I needed to do more to find the career I wanted. And because of that, my entire focus shifted away from games and moved over to life, hence why I didn't return to Trails in the Sky. I also think this was compounded by the fact that even though I enjoyed the first few hours, the first Trails game didn't stand out to me as anything special, and it quickly lost priority because of that. But this did not mean I was entirely disconnected from Falcom Works. As I resolved to work towards a master's degree, I started to save up money by working retail in a lovely chain of stores called Boots. For those of you guys who don't know what Boots is, it's a pharmaceutical cum photo cum perfume opticians? It does a lot of stuff basically. And I worked for a year in the photo department to save up that dosh, and not gonna lie, the meal deals were sick in there, especially when I got my pick of the reduced food at the end of the day. Triple chicken madness. Anyway, going off topic there, but while I was saving up the monies, I didn't play any games, but I was listening to a lot of East music, stuff like this. And this. And naturally, with the YouTube algorithm doing its work, that eventually led me to more songs from Sound Team JDK, with Japanese names that I couldn't hope to read, but damn did I love the music. Whether it be at the gym or on the way home, I found myself listening to songs like this. And this. And like I say, I had no idea where these songs were from because the game title was in a language I couldn't comprehend, but I didn't care, I was digging these tunes. And that's not all, I also found a desktop background of 4 badass babes wielding weapons which, well, I couldn't refuse to use as my wallpaper. I didn't have a clue who they were, but didn't matter to me. And this pattern continued all the way through to 2015-16, where I once again returned to the University of Sussex to do my Masters. Now during my Masters year, I was a lot more attentive to say the least. I worked a heck of a lot harder to get a good grade, which was mostly down to spending $8,000 on the tuition alone. This was before postgraduate support, by the way. But as the year progressed and I found myself settling into my routine, I managed to free up some time to relax, especially on the weekends. I remember those Friday nights where I would finish a long day in the library trying to figure out what a put option is, and then drive back to the aptly named Big Mouth Burger at 8 PM to pick up a well-earned takeaway for the night, and dragging that baby back to my room for some me time. But instead of going back to JRPGs or anything like that, I went through a phase of reading visual novels like Clannad, Fate Stay Night, and Da Capo. This also coincided with mine rediscovering my enjoyment for anime, which I had since stopped watching come the end of that aforementioned assessment centre. And this spurred something within me. I knew that I wanted to do something different before committing myself to a career. I wanted to try something that I had never done before. And I remember the day well, where I was lying down watching Da Capo 2 of all things, and suddenly exclaiming to myself, I want to go to Japan. No sooner had I said those words to myself did I start researching ways that I could work and live in Japan. And that eventually led me not only to the company who would take me over there, but also the first video I ever made on this channel, since initially it was made to document my time out in the East. It's still there if you want to laugh and cringe in equal measure. Anyway, I'm going to go on a tangent as to how I ended up in Japan eventually, but don't worry, this is very much linked to my Discovering the Trails series. So, as the application progressed, I was eventually asked to go to, you guessed it, an assessment centre, my bane. But this one wasn't all that bad, it was literally just a test to see that you could speak English, plus a one-to-one interview to establish why you wanted to go there, and I was done by midday. A month of unease later, I got that dreaded email with the result, where I would find out if my efforts were going to bear any fruit. Needless to say, they did. The email came in stating that I had been accepted for a position and I was due to leave around September to December time. To say I was over the moon was an understatement, and in hindsight it was a little silly that I had no backup option if it did fail, but hey, it worked out in this case. And without a moment's delay, I started the process of visa applications and certificates of acceptance to make a trip to the land of the rising sun. Come late September 2016, I had touched down in Tokyo for my week of training, and not too long after that I was shipped out to Sapporo, the greatest city in Japan in my opinion, to work as an alternate, which basically meant I was a substitute teacher who would fill in for those who got sick. And even though it had its drawbacks like the need for ungodly levels of flexibility, maybe that's a story for another video, it also meant that I had a lot of free time in certain intervals. I've said it many times before on some of my older videos, but my time in Japan was the greatest year of my life, and in a way I still regret leaving. But hey, a promise to your parents is something you can't really break now, is it? It's a time in my life that I will never forget. I'm sure everyone has some sort of encounter like this, a reaction that they can't explain, something that they spontaneously feel attached to as soon as they come into contact with it. That is what Japan was for me. It fulfilled everything I wanted on a subconscious level. It achieved things that I never even knew I wanted to be fulfilled. The food, the people, the odd quirkiness at every corner, the rich history, the convenience. Everything was just perfect. But my time in Japan also indirectly led me back to JRPGs. As I travelled around and walked to Sapporo Station on the regular, I couldn't help but notice something on the walls, an advertisement for a film of all things that would just continually pop up. The film that it all harkened to was a certain piece known as Kimi no Na wa. Well, naturally, I saw it everywhere and that marketing worked on my weak mind, and I decided to watch the film around mid-2017. My goodness, what an absolutely amazing piece of work. The characters, the premise, the execution of that premise, the music, it was all mixed together seamlessly. Everything worked in Kimi no Na wa. And I strongly suggest that if you haven't watched it yet, please do, it's well worth it. But why am I mentioning a film of all things in a video like this? Well, as so often is the case when I find something like Kimi no Na wa, I became enamored with it and I started to research it more. I wanted to find out about the director in particular, and if he had worked on any other productions. and as I dug deeper into Shinkai Makoto's career, I noticed a company in his history that he had worked for 5 years, a name that sounded oh so familiar to me. Falcom. Could that be Nihon Falcom? I went further down the rabbit hole, and this research would eventually lead me to Shangri-La, one of the greatest games that I had ever played at that point in time. I started to stumble on articles for Ys 8, and its eventual localization in the West for PlayStation 4 in particular. Now, even though I didn't have a PS4 at this time, my next door neighbour did, and it just so happened that he was going to go home to see his family after my month of travelling around Japan was done. So he was happy to lend me the console during that period, and give me a place to stay since my tenancy was close to ending. So I thought, why not? Let's pre-order Ys 8 and I'll give it a whirl when I return. Come mid-August, my teaching contract was up, I didn't sign a new one, and I thus took my month-long journey through Japan, eventually ending up in Hiroshima down in the Kyushu region. And I will say now, what's an eye-opening journey, the wanderlust that came from exploring Japan. The contrast was captivating, like seeing the hustle and bustle of Tokyo on one day, and then witnessing the history-enriched summer festivals of the Tohoku region on another. And there I am going on a tangent again. Anyway, the travels ended, my apartment was gone, and my neighbour let me stay in his apartment for the final 3 weeks I had in Japan before flying back. And since I had time to burn, Ys 8 had just arrived, so I popped that baby in. It would keep me occupied for what remained of my time. No joke, I finished that game in 5 days, which was ludicrous speed for me, like 10 hours a day. Yes, the translation was terrible, but I didn't care. The game itself was a magnum opus of Falcom, an experience that I will never forget. A title that once again sparked my passion for JRPGs in particular. Falcom had delivered once again, and as I flew back to the familiar island of England and settled down in life, it wasn't long until I stumbled upon their greatest work. It was 2018. I found I was getting more free time to dabble in my reignited hobby, JRPGs. Too bad then that some of them almost snuffed that desire out near on immediately. I'm looking at you, Fairy Fencer and Agarest. Luckily, Tales of Symphonia picked up the slack, but it wasn't enough. I felt that there was still something missing, as if none of the games I played had replicated that sense of immersion or escape that Ys 8 had so effortlessly achieved. So, instead of throwing blanks at a proverbial dartboard, why not just look closer to home? Returning once again to the tried and tested Steam, I type in 6 letters. F-A-L-C-O-M. I gaze down that list, and I see something familiar. I notice a character in the promotional art who was on my desktop background. I then go to the trailer and notice more of the characters from said background, and I realise the soundtrack includes many of the same songs I have heard countless times during my commute and gym sessions. I see it's got excellent reviews, and it's got that stamp of quality that I associate with the name Neon Falcom. Not less than 5 minutes later, and I was playing The Legend of Heroes: Trails of Cold Steel. And this time, I did not abandon it. I was fixated on this journey from start to finish. I grew attached to the characters, I was drawn into the world of Erebonia, the slow burn that culminated in a fantastic finale and cliffhanger. It boasted that storytelling that I was looking for, it provided that missing element that I was searching for, and as I closed it down, I realised that I wanted more. And as if answering my desires, I noticed another game on my Steam list, a title that I had long since forgotten about. The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky. Is it coincidence? Or does it go deeper than that? Researching some more, it didn't take me long to understand that the Trails series was something special, an existence in gaming that would likely never be replicated again. An interconnected story spanning nearly 15 years at this point, which sprouted a myriad of questions and possibilities in my mind. How does it all connect? What is this overarching story? Are there equally amazing characters in the other arcs? But why ask questions when I had a piece of the jigsaw right in front of me? From there, I revisited the land of Labelle that I had left behind in one of my darker hours 3 years prior. I journeyed with Estelle and Joshua and experienced one of the most gripping climaxes in any game. 2 weeks later, I bought Trails in the Sky's second chapter and saw the narrative take even grander twists, supported further by an excellent cast of characters. And 3 weeks after that, I bought Trails in the Sky the third, the epilogue of an emotional and gripping journey. And this was only one arc of games. I was hooked. I had found it, that same unconscious fulfillment of desire that I discovered while living in Japan. Whereas the Land of the Rising Sun was the realization of everything I wanted in terms of the perfect environment, the Trails series was the attainment of the perfect escape. A world that I could lose myself in, that made me realize I valued things that I didn't even know I valued in the first place. An interwoven universe of complex plots, sinister villains, and legendary heroes. And there it is, guys, how I became a Trails fan. I realised that this was a long one and it went off on the odd diversion here and there, but it was enjoyable for me to recount my steps to realise why I admire this series in the first place, and I wanted to convey to you why I hold Trails in such high regard and ultimately why I want to continue making videos that will bring the community together to discuss the games and hopefully bring new fans in as well. Most importantly though, I hope you enjoyed it. But now it's your turn. I want to find out how you guys became fans as well. I want you to share your path of discovery. What was the moment that sparked your love for the series? What was the story that brought you to Falcom's greatest achievement? Have a good one, guys. Peace.